Hello and welcome to The Switch. This is the series where we talk to inspirational people, each of them wildly successful in their own fields, about big turning points in their lives. I'm Gee Foottit and I'm lucky enough to quiz these people about the precise mix of skills, behaviours, traits and grit that have got them to the top of their game. In particular, I'm interested in that pivotal point in their lives, the light bulb moment that propelled them to a new level. I want to drill down into that moment and find out what it was that convinced these remarkable people it was the right decision. Join us for this week's episode, The Reset, as we discuss bouncing back from difficult situations, playing to our strengths and finding a path that works for you. Our guest will talk about her journey from marketing director to freelancer to flexible working spokesperson and how she turned a setback into the most exciting opportunity in her professional life. But importantly, The Switch is also about you, our listeners. Are you content with your life, your career? Are you considering making a switch of your own? Are you maybe looking for a new direction or the motivation to take a crucial step up? Whatever your situation, I hope that you'll take inspiration from this show. And as the series continues, we'd love to take your questions for our guests. To introduce myself, I work at St James's Place, the UK's largest provider of face-to-face financial advice. And I work within the Academy, which has so far trained over 1,000 people to become financial advisors. These are people from all walks of life who have decided to make a career switch of their own. To inspire others to do the same, we're talking to extraordinary leaders across entertainment, sport, psychology, and in this episode, a trailblazing advocate for flexible working. Today, I'm joined by Katy Fridman. Katy is a business leader and spokesperson with a background in marketing and law. Following her law degree and showing an aptitude for marketing and leadership, Katy worked her way up the corporate ladder to become Director of Marketing at Microsoft Advertising. After taking maternity leave after the birth of her daughter, she then took voluntary redundancy. She took this as an opportunity to find work that she could fit alongside her new responsibilities as a parent. In 2018, frustrated with the lack of flexible working opportunities and seeing others in the same boat, she founded Flexible Working People as a community on Facebook. 10,000 members joined in the first 6 months, sharing advice, opportunities and encouragement to great success. 5 years later, Flexible Working People is now the UK's largest flexible working talent community, with over 100,000 members across all platforms. The company has evolved to feature websites, jobs board, newsletter and resources supporting people to find, maintain or get back to a career they love on terms that work for them. Katy currently balances her family life with growing and managing Flexible Working People network. She also contributes regularly in the media and speaks at high-profile events as a thought leader for flexible working, gender equality and senior women in business. Katy, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to join us on The Switch.
Thanks, Gee. Thank you so much for having me.
Like many of our guests, there wasn't one single change-up moment that really defines your career. But first, tell us a bit about yourself in your early life. How did your initial move to marketing come about? And what gave you the motivation to do so?
I was always very keen on working in business, but my parents had different thoughts for me and different ideas about what I should do. And I was surrounded by people who were very clever and worked really hard and did really well and went to university. So that was always a path that I was going to follow. So I went to university and I started doing a PR degree. And after a year, I thought, this isn't actually for me. I don't really need to do a degree in PR. And I left and I came back to London and studied law. And that's mainly because my parents were really pushing me to become a lawyer. So these are just some changes along the way. And I spent 3 years doing a law degree. And by the end of that, I thought, this isn't really what I want to do after all. And so I still felt quite passionately about PR and marketing. And my mum saw a job ad in the local paper at the time that said, legal publisher seeking marketing assistant. And I thought, oh, that sounds really interesting. That could be a really good combination of, I've just finished my law degree and actually marketing something I'm really keen on and interested in. I want to get into business. And so that was kind of my first foray into marketing. And I started right at the bottom, a sort of editorial assistant / marketing assistant. And I never had any formal qualification. So for me, it was all about learning on the job and working my way up that sort of career ladder. I was at Centaur Publications at the time, working for an online legal information service. These were the days of, I'm making myself sound really old now, but modems and dial-ups. And all of that. And it was at that time trying to convince lawyers that actually they should be accessing their information online. And I just found all that really exciting. And the digital world was, we were right at the early stages. And so I spent quite a long time at Centaur working my way up through as marketing assistant, marketing manager, head of marketing. And then a job came up at Microsoft. And that sounded really exciting. And at the time, it was MSN. I don't know if you remember sort of the MSN Messenger and all their brilliant products. And so I joined Microsoft on their advertising business. And that was a really pivotal change for me. Microsoft's really such an exciting business. It combines sort of technology and business and all my marketing skills. And I spent about 9 years at Microsoft, again, really grafting and working my way up from sort of marketing manager to partner engagement manager to lead to head of comms to acting marketing director to marketing director. So it was a real journey. And I never really planned that journey and that path. I think some people, start and think, this is where I want to get to. I never really had any intentions of where I was going to end up. But I ended up sort of quite senior, managing teams, travelling quite a lot globally with my job, which was really exciting. And that was all up until the point where I had my first child.
That sounds amazing, Katy. And a couple of things I want to delve into in your answer there. So first of all, the influence our parents have on us. So you clearly got your work ethic, or I'm assuming you got your work ethic from your family. What did your parents do out of interest?
My mum always worked, but she was also a bit of an entrepreneur. She used to have a property business and she worked out of the kitchen cupboard when I was young. I was talking about this yesterday, about the people who influence us in our lives. And actually, my mum always earned a living and she was a really good role model for me because she would totally fit her work around me and my sister when we were younger. And she was also always sort of picking up the phone and pretending she wasn't, didn't have 2 children sitting there watching Neighbours in the background. So she was a real inspiration to me. And my dad also, he ran his own business. So our family is part of Tesco, the supermarket group. And my dad was a director of that. It was a family business. And he was a director of Tesco's for many years. And my dad decided to make a massive career pivot, which we could talk about for hours, which was to leave Tesco's and set up a competitor supermarket chain called Big Save. And so my dad was a super entrepreneur in that respect. Obviously, now we know more about Tesco's than we do about Big Save, so I'm not sure that was the right decision. But my parents were a massive influence in my career.
Wow. And just also your point that you had quite a strong influence to become a lawyer from them. But quite early, actually, in your career, you decided that you wanted to steer away from that as a direction. But in speaking to people that join St James's Place and their career moves, often it's mid-career that they say, oh, I got into this career because my parents wanted me to do so. And it's much later in life that they're brave enough, if you like, to face the fact that it wasn't really for them. So how do you think you recognised that as a young person? How did you let your parents, down, I suppose?
Yeah, I think that law for me always felt quite dry. It was quite learned. And, I learnt law by rote. And it was never something that excited me and lit my fire. And I knew that really early on. And, having studied it, I thought, do I actually want to do this? No. And it wasn't a big pushback. I think my parents just wanted me to go, a traditional route and have the opportunity to earn a good income and to have a good profession. But I always showed much more entrepreneurial spirit. I was always wanted to go my own path and make my own mistakes. And my parents sort of admired that in me as well. So I would always do my thing. And I was that way from a very young age. So I was always pushing back and wanting to do things my way. And I think you can tell when you're young, sort of the nature and the path that you will go. Yeah. There are some very earnest, studious people who go one direction. And then there are people who are sort of just naturally more entrepreneurial. I remember from a really young age, selling sandwiches on, at car boot sales and always wanting to earn money in any way I can, and coming up with all sorts of harebrained schemes with my friends. And I think, they're all signals, aren't they? That
definitely
that you want to be in business and that's the route for you.
I think so. And I'm sitting here with a big grin on my face while I'm talking to you. I know this is an audio podcast, but I've been working with you for the last 4 years. And so I can see that from you over the last few years working with you. So I'm just smiling because I can imagine you as a young Katy doing all of those things you just described. So from your early learning then in studying law, do you feel like there were any things that were easy for you to transfer into your new marketing career early on?
I think it was just quite rigorous in terms of, a law degree is quite tough and it's not an easy route. I found it quite a tough degree. I think that sort of the learning aspect of it and building on those skills, they're always great skills to take forwards. But no, I don't think I've ever lent on my law in terms of the future. I think it was just a really good foundation for learning and taking in information. And I think that follows you through in anything that you do. There's always going to be, whatever changes you make, that aspect of learning and understanding and absorbing new information. And I think law was a really good, challenging experience and path to help me with that in the future.
Absolutely. And you mentioned your path to director level within a big corporate, such as Microsoft. That doesn't come easy to anybody. So that's proof of your hard work, grit and determination, if you like. And you said you didn't necessarily see yourself in that role. It kind of came about naturally. Would you agree?
Yes. And I'd also like to say that not only did I not see myself in the role, but even when I was in the role, I didn't see myself in the role. And I think that's also really interesting. And I don't know whether it's, a female thing. And we talk about a term called imposter syndrome. And I think a lot of women suffer from it. And I very much think that I did so as well. Even when I was, head of partnership engagement and leading teams, I always thought I'd get found out one day. So there wasn't this natural confidence in my leadership. I was like, oh, yes, here I am. I've made it. It was always one day someone will catch me out and realise that actually I'm not as good as I say I am, or I can't actually do it. And I still think even to this day, there's a part of me, even sitting here today, that's thinking, why am I sitting here today? Why are you interviewing me? Am I good enough? And I don't know. I said, I don't know whether that is a female thing, but it's always carried me all the way through. I've always sort of questioned, am I good enough? Should I be a leader? Am I doing the right things? And I don't know whether that's common in other leaders or whether others just have that natural confidence. But it's quite interesting because it is something that has sort of always played on my mind.
Absolutely. I think in this series, when I'm interviewing people about switches they've made, particularly, and it's in the early days of their switch, imposter syndrome is certainly something that has affected most people, be they men or women. But I can certainly relate as a woman to that feeling of, it annoys me when people always talk about confidence in women or lack of confidence in women, but I can relate to it. And potentially we just admit it more than men. I don't know. Let's see. Well, let's speak to more people and we'll find out the answer to that question. So was it a particularly male-dominated environment when you were there?
Interestingly, most of my bosses were male, but most of my counterparts were female. So I was co-acting director of marketing with another lady. It was actually quite female-dominated. And interestingly, we all seemed to start families at the same time, to the increasing frustration of my boss at the time, who literally had to sort of have contingency planning for every single member of his team and used to make jokes about the person who sat on the chair that then ended up going on maternity leave, which now I don't find as funny as I think that it was then. But yes, we were a very female-led team. So I had a lot of strong female women within the team and within my world. And I had a few people reporting into me, and I think I'd say pretty much all of them were women.
That's really good to hear. So let's talk about the biggest switch in your career so far, Katy. And then you've alluded to it just now in terms of people, reaching that time where they're expanding their family or starting a family for the first time at a similar time. So what was that like for you personally?
So that was probably the most challenging time in my life, because I'd worked really, really hard to get to that point in my career. And I'd always been driven by my career and climbing the ladder. And I wasn't one of those women who just always wanted to get married, meet their husband and settle down. In fact, I didn't meet my husband until I was in my early 30s and very established at work. And I didn't have ambitions and dreams of sort of falling pregnant and having a family. It was just all about the career. So I did get married and I did fall pregnant with my first child, with our first child. But I wasn't anticipating what came next. And I know that many women will identify with me on this, because suddenly everything changed. And actually, at the time that I was coming out of Microsoft, I knew that there were lots of changes going on in the business. And I was managing a lot of corporate change, and there were a lot of redundancies. And I knew that there was a chance that my job wouldn't exist when I came back. So that wasn't surprising. But I sort of hadn't got the vision of what was next. And suddenly I had a young child. I was off on maternity leave. I didn't really recognise who I was because all I ever knew was my career. I didn't know what to do with this child who'd arrived, being really honest. I outsourced help in the form of sort of maternity nurses and people who could come and help me because I was quite terrified. And I don't think people should be ashamed to say that they found that period really hard. I'd always been quite defined by my career, and suddenly I couldn't go to work. I was up all night. I was totally sleep deprived. And then when it came back to going back to work and my job wasn't there anymore, that was a massive shock. And I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. And so I was offered the opportunity to take redundancy, and I took it because at the time there weren't any viable options for me to go back unless I wanted a massive global role. And I was already having a bit of an identification crisis anyway, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So this switch, this change was almost forced upon me. And I think that in life you'll have changes and switches that happen as a result of circumstance, and then there are switches that you make because you decide to make them, and I think there is a distinction. And in this case, I didn't really have a choice. I'd had my daughter, and I'd taken the redundancy, and it was a massive now what.
So how did you get through that transition? What did you feel was the biggest challenge?
So initially, I really struggled. I carried on being a mum and playing that role. And in the back of my mind, I was sort of, not even the back of my mind, but now at the forefront of my mind, it was now what? What do I do next? Do I want to go back into a similar role? Do I want to go back into corporate world? Do I want to work full time? What does that look like? And I really didn't know. And at that time, there weren't that many flexible opportunities available for women or flexible opportunities available for anybody.
What year was your daughter born?
So she was born in 2011. But it wasn't what it is now, and we'll talk about that. But at that time, it was more you go back to work full time. You could put a flexible working request in, but mostly everybody worked full time. And so I really had to reevaluate what that next chapter looked like for me. And actually, as much as transitioning was hard, I sort of knew that I wanted to be a part of my daughter's early days, her, those formative years. I didn't want to just hire a nanny and get a full-time job and go back. Something inside me had shifted, for sure. And so that was really sort of that battle of, well, that's what I know, and this is where I am. What do I do? And I really did find that challenging, and I know many other women do. I just dug deep, and I thought, I'm not going to make any really fast decisions. I'm going to think about what I can do and how I can work and how I can earn money and sort of do the juggle. And so for a number of years after Jessica was born, I freelanced, I supported businesses as a marketing consultant. I dipped in and out of various businesses. I worked for a company called the Bread Factory for a number of years as their commercial director, which was really fun, where I just ate loads of cake and ended up being a food taster. I'm not really sure how that even happened. I worked, and then I stayed in food, and I had lots of really amazing opportunities working in businesses, supporting them, but nothing was solid. But it was definitely helping me during those transitional years to earn money and to be a part of, have a family. And during those years, I then had my second child. So I think our life and our work is we call it sort of very squiggly. It's not a straight linear line. And I think, very rarely do people have an incredibly straight linear line. And particularly women, when they come to these points in their careers, when they have children, and there are sort of those stop points and those moments where, the line squiggles and you're like, what do I do next? And you do different things. And I think those 5 years were just a really interesting and maybe unsettling but exciting time for me. And as a result of that, I realised that actually I wasn't really earning, as I was coming out the other side of really young children, I wasn't really earning what I wanted to earn. I wasn't really where I wanted to be. Why was I in this situation? I'd worked so hard and built this fantastic career, yet here I was really struggling to find my place back in the workplace. And that really frustrated me.
I can imagine. I'm really resonating with everything you're saying, Katy. So at what point did you realise that you wanted or needed to start a Facebook group?
So when I set up the Facebook group, I set it up, really, I was mortified, actually, as I set it up. I was embarrassed, and I thought it would be a sign to people that I wasn't doing very well. So I didn't set it up thinking, oh, here I am, going to rally everyone together. I sort of just set it up and thought, I'm sure there must be people like me who are feeling like this. And maybe if I set up a Facebook group called, actually at the time it was set up as Flexible Working for Mums Like Me. And I was meeting lots of mums like me at, nursery and at pick up, and I was talking to other women. I was hearing the same thing. So I knew that I wasn't alone, but I just thought, well, let's get together. Let's share advice. Let's support one another. Let's create a community. Let's see what we can do. So I set it up. I was a bit anxious that people would think, gosh, she's really not doing very well. 1 minute she was sort of leading teams, and now she's setting up a group called Flexible Working for Mums Like Me. But my God, did it change my life. And it just took off like a bullet. It literally went mad. My entire network of women around me all joined, and then the momentum just built and built and built. And I think, as you said in the introduction, after a month, there were sort of 10,000 women.
Wow.
And these were professional women who had careers or were in careers, who wanted flexible working, who were sort of taking a stand and saying, let's change this. What's going on in the workplace? We want our place back. Or we want to find a place. We want the workplace to embrace us. We want to stand up to this. And it was just an incredible feeling that, these women were all coming together, all to champion the same cause and the same message, which was, we are important in the workplace. We should have a place in the workplace. The workplace is broken. It's not us. And I think that was a really important sort of recognition, or sort of the penny dropped, that I think for a while you think, is it me? And I think I spent a lot of time thinking, is it me? And then I realised, no, it's not me. The workplace is actually broken. It's not set up for women like me. Mm-hmm. It's just not set up for us, It's like you can't expect people sit in the boardroom and say, oh, where have all the women gone? Why haven't we got any senior women in leadership? Where have they all gone? Well, you're not offering them the ability to come back. And actually, the truth is, it shouldn't be all about women, and we know that, and we'll talk about that. But still, sadly, women take the brunt of childcare and responsibility, family responsibility, and that still falls to women. So more than anything, women need that flexibility in order to be able to maintain their careers and to manage their family. And there has been a lot of change. We have moved forward. The pandemic's had a massive impact on all of that. And now I realise that it's really not all about women at all. Flexible working and flexibility is about everybody. Everybody should have the right to work flexibly. It's not a perk that should be afforded to women. And the pandemic's really shifted that conversation.
I completely agree. Before we move too much into that direction, at what point, when you created this Facebook group, you created huge momentum very quickly, like a bullet, you said. At what point did you see it as your new career, as a direction for yourself?
Not for a really long time. So I ran it as a community for a good 2 to 3 years, 2 years at least. It wasn't about making money. It was about building momentum, and it was about championing a cause. And even now that it is a business, I'm still much more driven by my mission than I am about the money and the commercial aspect of it. And I always put the mission first. And I'm a champion of flexible working before I am a business person. But it emerged as I was doing this, and I wasn't earning any money at this point. So I'd been freelancing, but now all my time was being poured into this group, into this community. And interestingly, the community wasn't just filled with people looking for work. It started to be filled with people who were looking to access people who wanted to work. So I was finding that there were hiring managers and companies and, senior leadership and all sorts of people in the community who were running businesses, who were seeing the opportunity and starting to think, actually, there's this incredible population of talent that we're not tapping into. And so companies started approaching me and saying, oh, you've got these marketing directors and HR managers and, sort of all this talent. And actually, I'd love to hire one of your professionals. How can I do that? And so the business sort of organically grew out of the community. And so I built relationships with businesses and corporates and so on. And slowly, we started introducing commercial models and people who wanted to access talent. And so we built a jobs board. We built a website. And so the business really organically grew. And I was really anxious about that flip from being somebody who was just supporting women or everybody in finding flexible working to suddenly being commercial was a point of real anxiety for me, because I didn't want people to think that it was about the money. I still wanted people to recognise that I was passionate about the mission. And so I had to tread really carefully around what that looked like and how I approached it.
Mm-hmm. I can understand that. And what advice would you give anybody listening that might be in a similar position to you, where you were prior to founding Flexible Working People, or that kind of frustration they may be in a career break for one reason or another? It doesn't always have to be for caring responsibilities.
Who are feeling stuck?
Yeah, and frustrated.
So I think that if you're feeling stuck and frustrated, you want change, and change is sometimes really tough. And change is one of the hardest things, but it's also one of the most exciting things. And you've got to sort of take a step back and do the work, I think, dig a bit deep and look at what you're frustrated with. What are the things that you're not enjoying about what you're doing? Is it the lack of autonomy? Is it your boss? Is it the environment you're in? What are the things that really aren't working for you? And I think once you start to unpick that, then you can start to build a path for what the future looks like. So it might be that you're really unhappy because you're working for a boss who's making you really miserable, but you really love your job. Or it might be just that, you've been doing in a career for so long and you've just become so used to doing it, but actually you've fallen out of love with it and you don't know that it's actually making you happy anymore. And there's lots of people like that who think, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. You reach a point in your life where, we call it career pivot, and you think, I need to make a change. How do I make that change? And I think, that's all about, we're talking today, aren't we, about how do we make that change? And I said earlier, there's that moment in time when you're forced to make change and you have no choice but to make change. And in some ways that's easier because it's forced upon you and you're thrust into, okay, well, what does that mean? It's do or die. I've got to make this happen. But when you're not forced into change and you're just sort of sitting there feeling like you want to change, but you're not really sure what that looks like, that's tougher, that's harder. And it's like, when do I make the change? What is that change? And that's the part where you have to start doing all the unpacking and the unpicking. And it's really messy at the beginning, really messy. I remember sitting there before I set up the Facebook group thinking, what could I do that could work for me? What do I like? What could I do? I wrote down ridiculous things like I could become a hairdresser, I could become a taxi driver, all the things that could give me flexibility. And then it was I could retrain in social media. What else could I retrain in? So you sort of start really big and then you start eliminating and then you start fine-tuning and you start thinking, what am I really good at? What do I love doing? What am I passionate about? If I think about all the things that I'm good at, how could I transition that into doing something I love? Do I have any passions or hobbies that, I could turn into something? So it is a process and it's not an overnight process. You can read all the books and all the self-help and it's a process. And I think it's really hard to do that alone. I would say, if you can afford to, then, get help. There are so many incredible career coaches. We've got so many in our community who help people make these career shifts. People are often afraid to spend money at times like that. But it's an investment in your future. And actually, I think that you should invest in yourself. You should invest in upskilling. You should invest in advice and working with people who can help you to get to the place that you want to be. And actually, it's a great investment in yourself. So people shouldn't be afraid to make those investments in change because it's really tough to do it on your own.
I completely agree with that. So Flexible Working People has seen great success. And you've mentioned we're touching 100,000 members now across all your platforms. You've brought your insights and your expertise to others through podcasts, through events, in person and virtually in your Facebook group. What skills do you personally call on most in your day-to-day life now?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I have to call on so many skills every day because when you run a business, one minute you're head of finance, you're doing all the forecasting and the financing and the accountancy. Then the next minute you're doing all the marketing and sending out, emails and doing all your social media. And the next minute you're on a phone call to a client and you're tapping into all your sort of empathetic listening skills and your communication skills and your skills of persuasion. And the next minute you're thinking about your business plan. So, I tap into so many different skills every day. But one thing I've learned about myself is that I can't do everything. I think everybody knows they can't do everything. And one of the things that's really helped me is to identify the things I'm not as good at, and to start playing to my strengths. And there's a cliched expression that one of my business coaches taught me, which was do what you do best and outsource the rest. And I was always a little bit worried about spending money on outsourcing in the early days. But I've realised that actually it's the best thing that you can do, because, you can't do everything and you can't grow your business if you're involved in the minutiae every day. And so that was a really good lesson early on in getting help. And so focusing on those skills that you're good at and focusing on your strengths, and then either building a team around you that help to support you, to help you to be your best and for them to fill the gaps, or to outsource the things that you're not that good at or you shouldn't be spending time on.
I think that's such sound advice, as difficult as it feels at first if you've never done that before. But then you're liberated in both time and creative thinking, aren't you? Or to do the other things that you're really good at.
Well, my husband always says to me, you love delegating, and I do. And when I was at Microsoft, and when you get to be quite senior, you are in that lovely position where you can delegate. And I've realised that I'm much better now at delegating. I'm much better at delegating than doing. I'm a really big picture thinker. I'm not interested really in the detail. And I think that's part of the playing to your strengths. So for me, coming up with ideas, big picture thinking, what can we do with the business is all the fun bit. And then the sort of the operational implementation bit, the bit where I struggle. And I think that's okay. We can't be good at everything. And that's the bit in business where I suppose that separates you from being a leader and, being a doer.
Yeah. I love that. And not being shy or scared about that. Just be really honest with yourself and build the right team around you. What do you feel is the main way people can achieve a positive change when they're faced with a career reset?
Okay, so I think that when you're faced with a career reset, the first thing you have to do is to redefine what success looks like for you. I think that what success has looked like for you in the past isn't necessarily what success looks like for you in the future. And that was also a really big sort of change for me. So in the past, success had always looked like a corporate role, big salary, a company car, global traveling. And actually, in order to achieve change, you have to realise things will change. And what does that mean and what does that look like? And being prepared to think about what it is that you want now in this new stage in your life. And we go through these transitions all the time, and at different stages you need different things. And so what you might need in the next stage is different to where you were. And at that point you have to redefine what success looks like and say, those things aren't important to me anymore. This is what's important to me. So it's constantly shifting your mindset into where you are at that stage in your life. And I think that, particularly for me, becoming a mum, it was, the shift was actually, I do want to spend time with my family. I don't want to travel the world. I want to be present. And what success looks like for me now is so different. I don't necessarily need to earn that level that I was earning. I don't necessarily need the big title. But this is what I do want. And it's sort of that shift in mentality that helps you to sort of readjust into what future you looks like.
I think that's such good advice. And also when you're making those big decisions in the early stages of your shift from one identity, I suppose, to another one, it might be quite difficult to define what success looks like in the new chapter of you. But to look at it as a new chapter, it's not the end of the story. I think so often, whether it's your first career, your second career, or whatever it might be, people feel like this has to be forever, and they put too much onus on the decision sometimes. But actually, just to look at it as a chapter in life, this is what's important to me right now, and that can change again. It can change again in the future.
That's a really good point. And I would also say that nothing that you decide is forever. There are always options. And so when people worry about making changes, first of all, change can be really exciting, but sometimes we make changes and we make mistakes, and that's okay too. It's good to make mistakes because that helps us to find the path to, what's going to be right. And we always have options, we always have options If you make a mistake, that's okay. You can press rewind and you can reset and you can go again.
Yeah. So do you think there's an ideal time to make a significant career or life change, or like waiting for the right time, or is seizing the day the best thing to think about?
I think it really depends. I don't think there's ever a time when you'll wake up one morning and go, today is the day. I mean, maybe you will, but it never has been for me. And even when you feel like it is the right time, you still question whether it's the right time. Yesterday I was doing a live event and somebody on the group asked me, when will I know when it's the right time? When will I know? You might not know. Sometimes you just have to take a chance and take a leap. And actually, sometimes I advise that you don't make the leap. You take a small step towards it. And, you know, there's a lot of talk now about side hustles and, you know, people who have their jobs and then they start building things on the side. And that's actually a really good way of testing the waters before you make a big change. So rather than jumping straight in, you know, 2 feet first, you say, actually, I'm going to try and run these alongside each other for a while, test the waters and see whether this is going to work for me or not. And then you get to that point where you think, oh, this feels good, this feels right. And then you can shut the door, close the door on the past chapter and move into the new. Or maybe you just jump and hope the net will appear. That's my favourite expression.
Oh, I love that. Well, two really good options there, aren't there? I like the try before you buy, because I think your energy naturally flows to something that you are genuinely interested in. But I also like the jump off the cliff and the net will appear. So what are some ways that our listeners can build their skills and confidence to make future transitions easier?
So I think invest in yourself. I've talked about that already. If you're looking for a career change, it can be tough to move without having the skills that you need to move into the new career that you're looking to go into. And there are so many opportunities to upskill. And so investing in yourself and investing in training, investing in learning, and all of those good things are really going to set you up, you know, in good stead for a career change. You know, I've said already, working with people who are around you, who can help you to get to where you want to be, surround yourself by, or go and have coffees or meet people who are doing what you want to do and learn about, you know, what does it mean? Is this right for me? Sort of do your research, really dig deep, really do your research. If you don't know where to start, you've got to start at the beginning and know that the journey might be a bit messy and you'll get there. It feels like you won't ever know where the end point is, but you will get there. You just have to start at the beginning and not go, okay, well, I'm really frustrated because it hasn't happened for me overnight. The greatest entrepreneurs and success stories are not people who have literally the slog and the backstory and the failures and all of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. They, you know, you don't know about, you don't see. You only see the, oh, look, they're looking really successful. Look at, you know, Stephen, can't remember his surname now. Stephen
Bartlett.
Yeah, he's my favourite.
Me too.
Yes, so if you hear his story, you know, it wasn't that he literally just accelerated his career. There's a journey, there's a path, there's always the path. And unfortunately, it's not always an easy path. And you have to dig really deep and you have to find your way. But keep going. And I think the path shows itself. I think that, you know, you'll find your way.
I agree. And also don't be scared to ask for help. Something I really like people to do is to think about their personal network. Where are they aspiring to get to? Is there somebody already in that type of role? Go and speak to them. People are really open to helping. I think if I was asked for help, it's flattering. It's a flattering thing to be asked for help. So don't be scared of approaching people.
Always use your network. The word network people don't like, but network really just means the people around you. Who are the people around you? Who are your friends? Who are your contacts? Who are your connections? Who can help you to get you to where you want to be? And as you said, people really do love to help and love to be asked. And I think that when you're quite introvert and you're quite inward thinking and you don't put yourself out there, then opportunities don't open themselves up for you. So opening yourself up and being vulnerable sometimes is the best way to get where you want to get to. I mean, I see these incredible people on LinkedIn sometimes who say, you know, this is the point I'm at, I need help, can you help me? And floods of people who step in and say, yes, we can. People want to help. And if you're not vulnerable and you don't open yourself up, then no one can help you. So
nobody knows you.
No
need
one knows
the
you
help.
even need the help.
Exactly. So, Katy, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. What's going on in your life right now? What's on the horizon for you and for flexible working people?
So for me personally, my daughter's just started secondary school and my son is now 10. So I'm in a new part of my life, which I'm really enjoying, where they're not babies anymore. And it's giving me, they've got different needs, but it's just giving me more breathing space and longer days to focus on the business, which I'm finding really exciting. The business is growing. The community is growing every day, and I'm thinking about more ways that we can help more people at scale to find the flexibility that they need. I'm still really championing flexible working and how we can convince more companies as they play what I call the hokey cokey of in the office, out the office, remote, back in the office, and trying to get to a place where flexible working is not a perk, but it's sort of a rite of passage. It's just a way of working where everybody has some control over how and where they work. So I'm going to continue to bang that drum. I'm going to continue to scale flexible working people. And as I said, just want to help more and more people to find, the flex that they need to be able to maintain their careers and have careers they love on terms that work for them.
Fantastic. Well, I've enjoyed working with you over the last few years, Katy, and I look forward to continue to doing so over the next year and coming years. But where can people find you?
So you can head to the website, www.flexibleworkingpeople.com. Follow me on LinkedIn, Katy Fridman, and follow Flexible Working People. We're on Instagram, and absolutely come and join the Flexible Working People Facebook group, where you'll find people just like you and me, all sort of helping, guiding, supporting, and championing one another as we find our way on our journeys to our better, flexible life and future.
Thank you, Katy. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
This was the latest episode of The Switch. If you like what you heard, please come and find us on Spotify, follow us, and give us a 5-star review.